Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in just so we have enough time for discussion and questions. Um, Really quickly, I want to just welcome everyone to our WICT Wednesday session. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jessica Pedigo, and I'm on the WICT Heartland board and the chair of our mentoring and professional development team. And I would like to extend a very special welcome today to our mentee class of 2020. They are joining, and I know we have several of our wonderful mentors on the call as well that are guiding them on their career development. So welcome and a shout out to all of our mentees this year. Also, just quick housekeeping, a quick thank you to our WICT Heartland sponsors for making events like this possible. We have our platinum sponsor, Cox Communication, our gold sponsors, ProLabs and Add-On, and our silver sponsors, Multilink and Power and Tel. So thank you to our sponsors. We'd also like to welcome all of our WICT Heartland members, as well as any guests that they have invited to join us today. Whether you're a Heartland member or not, you're always welcome to visit our website and see a full list of upcoming events, as well as information on becoming a WICT member. We also encourage you all to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can just search WICT Heartland Chapter to find us. And if you need a refresher on all the benefits for your membership, you can check us out on our YouTube page. And it has lots of videos that walk you through how to access and utilize them. So just some quick little notes there. So now let's kind of think about, I'm gonna change course here and we're gonna talk about today's topic. So when we think about our topic today, learning to say no, I'm sure that many of us have felt guilty or uncomfortable saying no at work. And if this is the case for you, you're not alone. You may think that people might dislike you, think you are entitled, or question whether or not you're a team player. And this actually couldn't be further from the truth. It may seem odd to some of us, but if you learn how to say no strategically and respectfully, it can actually help you in your career. And today we've invited two highly seasoned and engaged leaders to answer questions and discuss how they've navigated this very topic in their own careers as they've grown. And many of you might already know Jennifer Bergman and Chris Walter, but for those of you that don't, I'm going to give a quick background. So Jennifer Bergman serves as Chief Financial Officer for United Private Networks. UPN provides high broadbandwidth fiber-based communications networks and services to schools, governments, carriers, data centers, hospitals, and enterprise business customers across a 20-state service area. Prior to joining UPN, she spent 18 years with Cox Communications, the majority of that time serving as the Vice President of Business Operations for our Central Region. And not only does Jennifer serve on the WICT Executive Board for the Heartland chapter, she is also a Betsy Magnus Leadership Institute graduate and also has been involved with Junior Achievement since 1992 and now serves on the Board of Directors for the Greater Kansas City area. She is also a member of the KCI Rotary Club. She resides in Kansas City with her husband Wayne and two children, Nathan and Nicholas. And as for Jennifer's new normal, they are still spending their summers at the baseball fields watching their 17-year-old son pitch and play first base. The only difference is they are a bit heavier on the takeout food versus the dining in these days. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
You bet.
And Chris Walter, this is funny. So when I reached out to Chris Walter for his quick little bio, guess what Chris Walter replied back with? No. It was a joke, obviously. So anyway, I thought that was really funny. I said, I'm going to tell everybody you said no. So I thought that was funny. But Chris Walter has been with Cox for 21 years. And during his time, he has had the opportunity to serve in 5 different leadership roles and departments, including customer care, sales, field operations, residential marketing, and currently with Cox Business as the Director of Order Management and Sales Support Team with fulfillment responsibilities in Kansas and Arkansas. Chris received his Bachelor of Science from K-State University and his MBA from Newman University. Chris describes himself as a fanatic about both employee and customer experience. And Chris is currently a member of the Black African American ERG, a member of the Wichita Rotary Club, and has been a WICT member since 2013. Chris has also volunteered with Big Brothers Big Sisters as a part of their BIGS program. And Chris is married and has 4 children and is passionate about going to concerts, playing guitar, craft beer, working on his golf game, and spending time with his family and friends. As for Chris's new normal, he is spending every day with his wife and kids and getting to know them all over again. For Chris, that's the silver lining in all of this, that he feels closer to his family. And honestly, I think we all do, right? So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. And with that being said, I am going to turn it over now to our moderator for this session, Miss Lisa Allen.
Hello, everyone. Will be guiding today's discussion, and I am a member of the WICT Mentoring Committee, and this is my second year on the committee, and it's grown me and it's pushed me out of my comfort zone. So I am just blessed to be a part of WICT, the organization itself. So we are so fortunate to have 2 accomplished and dynamic leaders. Okay, can you guys see me? Okay, Colleen is telling me my video's off. Okay, so let's start again. We are so fortunate to have 2 accomplished and dynamic leaders joining us today. Thank you both to Chris and Jennifer for taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with us. We want this to be a discussion among the entire group. So please, if you have a question, just open your mic and jump in. Or if you would rather, you could ask a question via chat. And our wonderful mentoring committee, Carrie Johnson, will be monitoring the chat box for us, and she will let us know as comments and questions come in. So let's get started. We asked Chris and Jennifer 3 questions regarding the topic of learning to say no. So Jennifer, let's go with you first. And our first question is, how have you learned in your career to set boundaries and say no?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for inviting me. I love being able to set aside time and say yes to WICT because it's something I'm very passionate about. And I feel like my career has advanced so much because of WICT. I want to pay that forward and give that back to everybody else. So feel very honored to be here. And also want to say that this is a group discussion. You certainly don't want to sit here and listen to me for 45 minutes. I see a lot of other leaders on this phone call. I see Matt Mazzoni and Debbie Cape and Patty Kavanaugh, and many others on this phone call. So we want to hear your input on all of these, not just my input. And I'm sure Chris feels the same way. So just to say what I've learned, to set boundaries and say no. I would say I probably spent the first 2/3 of my career not at all being the poster child for this. I said yes to way too many things, said yes, all the time. And I constantly was walking around with that guilt. I'm not spending enough time with my family, or I'm spending too much time with work, or I felt guilty that I'm going to some charity event and being pulled all the way. And I know this group just recently read the book Present Over Perfect by Shania Niequist. Love that book. It's a great book to help you guys think about how you prioritize and get comfortable saying no. So, many of you have known me over my career. I think, I would say the first 2/3 was saying yes to everything, and it's exhausting. You just wear yourself thin. I feel like probably maybe the last, 5 to 10-ish years, I've gotten much better at learning to say no. I am not an expert at it by no means, but I feel like I'm doing better setting boundaries. I think my number one thing that I'm focusing on is, as a CFO, I feel like every day meetings pop up at the last minute, and I'm always being pulled in a lot of different directions. And the old Jennifer would have figured out, how do I attend all those meetings? Like, I'm going to go the first half hour of this meeting, and I'm going to leave that meeting early, and I'm going to go the next half hour of the next meeting. And I'm going to try to figure out how to make, keep all the balls in the air. And I think what I've really starting to focus on and get good at is saying, where am I most needed today? Where am I going to have the most impact? What one thing can I focus on today and make a difference? I've got very capable people that can fill in for me if I can't be there. I'm comfortable that, yep, someone may not be happy or someone may be disappointed that I'm going to miss a meeting. But what is most important, and where am I going to have that most impact? And I would say that's not just work related, because sometimes work loses out. Sometimes the most important thing, and the most important thing for me to be focused on, is something family related. I'm going to hit my kiddos' baseball game or whatever, and that means that some crisis is going to come up. I may have to miss something at work. So it's that balance of figuring out what's most important for you that day, that week, that month, and letting go of some other things.
That sounds great. And Chris, how have you learned in your career to set boundaries and to say no?
First and foremost, thank you for having me. I made a joke to a few of my friends, and much like Jennifer, I probably started my career not necessarily knowing how to do this. In fact, I think, years and years ago, I think it was a great way to grow your career by saying yes all the time, right? Because you came to be known as somebody that they could go to, that was always willing to help and all these things. But over time, really what has happened, and I was going to set the table for this. In fact, I'm so sorry. I saw your 3 questions later. I had actually prepared some stuff, and then I saw the question. Okay, well, what am I going to do? But that's okay. I can intertwine them together. But you know, um, it's not sustainable in today's world, like it was, maybe 2 decades ago or even 10 years ago. So I think for me, you know, being able to say no is a critical skill as you grow your career, but how you do it is just as important as whether you can or not. If you bludgeon partners or peers and leaders with no, it's going to definitely limit your career. It's definitely going to impact your career progression and whatnot. Conversely, though, if you learn to say no with more of a what I would say like a velvet hammer, or use some kid gloves, or positioning and different ways of saying it, I think you'll find that you're going to get a lot more time to not only develop yourself, but you're going to get a lot more time to develop your team. Your work is going to be refined and be some of the best work you produce. You'll be more strategic, and really what is most important is you're going to have better life balance in your overall life. Because there's an ends to a mean, right? We work for the things that we want in life, family and friends and those type of things. And so that life balance is really, really key today. And and a note that I made as I was thinking about how I wanted to talk to the group, setting the table for why it's more important today than ever is I read an article a while back, and I was able to find it in Forbes magazine, but it talked about, remember, this is 2 years old. Okay, so this was written in 2018, but it said 2.5 quintillion bytes of data is created every day, and in 2018, 90% of the world's data had been created in the past 2 years. So when you think about the information that is coming at us, and the information that we are being bombarded with every day, it's it's growing at an enormous rate. So the average professional has over 200 emails in their inbox. The average professional is getting between 130 and 150 emails per day. And in the Cox culture, I would say we love email as much as anybody. So I don't know if I would agree with 150. Sometimes it seems like it's more. So with all of that said, you've got to set some boundaries, and you have to be able to say no at some level. Saying yes is great early in your career. It's just not sustainable long term. So how do you say yes, and then how do you how do you shift to no when you need to? I mean, we have, with the Internet of Things, there's refrigerators that send us emails and text messages now. I mean, none of that stuff existed before, right? And so there's just always something coming at you, and how do you balance it? As far as myself, how have I learned to, say no and set boundaries? I would say one is build your reputation first and good relationships. Because if you have a good reputation and if you have good relationships, right there, that's going to help you in saying no. Because the people that you're going to be dealing with are going to know you and be more familiar with you, and are going to understand your style. So that always make saying no easier. But another thing is you don't have to start with no. You can ask questions, you can clarify the ask. There's a lot of ways of saying no where, you know, it doesn't necessarily sound like no, like, hey, does this really align with our goals for 2020? Is this something we really need to be working on, right? So you're sort of leading people to the no. There's ways to do that by asking questions, and but no shouldn't be your default. So I think that that's another important thing to remember is you don't want your default to be no. There are people with a true brand of saying no, and that's not the brand you want, right? It's got to be, how do I say it strategically? How do I say it in a way that I'm making people feel valued? I'm considering their ask. I'm trying to give them my attention, but then I need to clearly set expectations that it's probably not going to happen, right? So it's tricky. It's not the easiest thing, but those are things that I always consider when trying to say no.
I think it's really interesting that you brought that up, Chris, because I've never thought of it in that perspective where in the beginning of our careers, you have to say yes, right? You're building that credibility, you're kind of the doer, you're the executor, and then as you grow in your career, and that's something that I'm trying to learn to navigate now as a manager, I have a team under me, and so I can't always take it on. I've got to think about how can I take what I'm being asked to do and maybe, engage my team to help support that. And so it's very interesting to think through that process of you got to get out of the habit of saying yes, right? Like you've got, like at one point in your career, you might be yes, 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 yes. And then at some point, as you get more responsibility and you're being brought into more projects, that's when it becomes more important to start prioritizing. So I think that's just an interesting way to look at it, because for me, I know that I'm personally struggling with that because I'm still new in my manager role, right? Like a couple years in, I still think of myself as new, but I find that, I have a sense of pride in work. So I tend to want to just make sure I'm executing it because I know it'll get done the way I want it to get done. And that's not always good, right? So it's just an interesting way to think of it. And I haven't really thought of it that way before.
To go along with, but I liked how Chris said, if you have that relationship, that's good. It also allows you to make sure somebody knows that they're being heard, because the worst thing can do is make a suggestion, or can we focus on this, can we go work on this, and someone tells you no. It's like, okay, did you just discount what I'm saying? Did I'm not heard. But also acknowledging, like, hey, that's a great idea. I'll either put that on our parking lot list, or I'll add that to our list. It's not something we're going to get to now, but it's probably something we can get to this fall, or we can get to it later this summer, or just to make sure someone someone knows that they were heard. You're not saying no and discounting what they're asking you to go do. I mean, there's lots of great ideas. It's just some are more critical, and you'll have to get to some of those later.
Hey,
I
there was
so
one.
appreciate the language. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say there was one question asked, but it was answered. But I just wanted to make sure everybody saw it. Jennifer, someone was asking about the name of the book that you referenced, but it was answered.
Okay, good. Yeah. I love you guys did the present over perfect. And even if you've read that book, get it out and read it again. Like, I think I've read it twice now. I'm probably ready to read it a third time. That's a game changer book for me. And I was already doing some of the things that she said in that book. And then it really helped validate, like, oh my gosh, like she wrote down everything I was feeling. So it's a great book.
Well, thank you for those suggestions. Like for me, it's how do you tactfully tell someone no? And so, Chris, your examples of building a relationship and then asking questions and clarifying the ask was just spot on. That gives me an idea of how, when that happens, that's how I can handle the situation. So I appreciate this the strategy there and the language to use from both of you. Um, Chris, let's start off with the second question with you. And are there any tips or tricks for practicing this skill that you can share with us?
So I thought long and hard about that, and I think the best feedback or the best guidance I could give for my own career is and you just said it, Lisa, but it's the type of language we use. There's a lot of ways to say no that don't sound like no. So if I was going to practice the skill, I would be considering alternative forms of language that I could use to, you know, stress the need to one, I need to clarify the ask. I might need more information. Let's table this, so that let me go back and take a look. Because one thing I always try to do, I mean, listen, out of full transparency, there's been times where I've heard an ask where in my mind immediately I was like, no, we're not doing that. But politically, that's probably not the right way to approach things, right? Or even being a good partner. Sometimes you need to slow down and think through it and go against your initial instinct too. So what I've always tried to do is take that and table it and then say, let me get back to you. Let me look at what we can do and get back to you. And I think that specifically can gain you credibility in the fact that, like Jennifer just said, that you're being cognizant of the ask, you're treating people with respect, you're listening to what matters to them, even if it's not going to strategically align with either one, your values, or two, what matters in your role and what your area of responsibility is, right? So I think that is really helpful. The type of language we use. I mean, I did some Google searches. I was looking at for some different ways of saying no prior to this, and just things. And one that I wrote down, like, it feels like we would benefit from shifting focus and resources elsewhere. So somebody's come up with an ask, and you're saying, well, we might benefit from shifting our focus and our resources elsewhere. And I'm a little concerned that, we're focusing our energy in an area that, hey, in 2 months, this might not even exist, or whatever the scenario is. And I think sometimes that just feels a lot more, it's not curt, it's thoughtful, it's sensitive, and people want to feel valued. And so if you can make people feel valued with their ask, even when you might not be able to deliver on it, I think that makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. And I know, Nancy, I believe you might have had a question, Nancy Owens.
Hi, yes. So I have a question and then a tip that I recently used. First, I'll go with the tip because it goes with what Chris was saying. I recently was feeling really overwhelmed and I was on a lot of committees, and I opted to step back in one of the committees. And the verbiage that I used to the team was just that. I said, I don't want to leave and be away from this committee, but I need to take a step back in my role. So that's another a good way to not say no, but maybe release some of those responsibilities. So that's one thing that kind of went with what Chris was talking about just now. But my question was, I don't know what we were talking about earlier, but it prompted the question. Some of the problems that I feel at times is whenever you're asked to do something, but then you can give it to another person. I always have the feeling of it's easier for me to just do it than to train somebody to do it. And I think that's where my issues come into play a lot is I could train you, but it's going to take me, all this time to train you. So I'll just do it myself. And that gets me into some problems of I always just say yes and just take over. So,
Delegation is a beautiful thing.
yeah.
100% agree with that. I find myself doing that all day, every day, right? I can do it faster if I just do it. Cher, I
Yeah.
think you might have something to contribute on that.
Yeah, I do want to add in on that. So, well, yes, I agree 100%. It can take twice as long. I have a teenage daughter, so there's that also, right? Don't take away the opportunity for somebody else to learn or grow or stretch and maybe even just tap into their own passion and strengths, right? So don't take away those opportunities for others. And I love all the language that you all have been leveraging, and that's part of how you can say yes, but it's not me, right? Somebody else can do it, but it's an opportunity for you to grow and stretch your own team or even just people that you work with if you don't have direct reports. So
Right,
thanks.
absolutely. Completely agree. It's part of that learning to be a leader sort of, means delegating, training, giving those employees opportunities. So I love that. Tracy Irving, did you have a question, or I thought I saw?
No, I was just letting you know that Nancy had her hand raised.
Oh, great. Thank you, Tracy. All right.
Fabulous. I love the discussion.
Hey, Lisa,
Jennifer,
Lisa,
do you have anything that you would like to add for tips or tricks for practicing this skill?
I'm sorry, Lisa, were you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, tips or tricks for practicing this skill. I'll find myself, I try to focus on maybe one or two like key things I know I want to get done this week or this month. I'm a list maker, and I'm usually circling things, and I find myself circling 3 or 4 things, and then crap, Friday hits and I haven't even accomplished anything on that list. So less is better. I try to focus on like, what is that one thing I need to do to this week? And I go into each week thinking about what's the most important thing for me to focus on. And again, that might not always be the company is first. The most important thing might be something personal I need to get done. And so I try to, for me, lists and what's most important at the top of that list is very key for me, and it kind of helps ground me a little bit through the week. So when all these emergency meetings are happening, and we need to hop in the room and talk about pricing for Timo, and we've got some other capital crisis going on, whatever all those crises are going on, I'll look at that list and say, is this where I need to be? Like, is this the most important thing for me to focus on? So for me, having that list and having that in front of me makes it a little bit easier for me to say no at times, and say, but again, hey, I can't do this now. Can we move that to Friday? Is this critical, or can we move it to next week? So negotiating when you're saying no sometimes is helpful. Where probably my number one trick for this is I got to see TD Jake speak. He's a pastor and an author, and I got to see him speak. And probably the best speaker I've ever got to see speak. And where I experience this most is where I know I'm going to some kiddo thing, and then crisis happens at work, and we need to get on a phone call. We need to solve this today. My president, my CEO can be very persistent. Like, we got to get this done. And I will, all right, I'm going to take this thing from my car, I'm going to do all this stuff. And then the next thing I know, I've missed half of my, kids' baseball game. And one thing he said is never miss something twice. And so if you know anything about him, he's he's very involved with this congregation, and he is an author, and he has a congregation, and he's produced content, TV programs. And so he always said he felt guilty, because if he was with his congregation, he felt guilty that he was missing something at home with his family. And if he was with his family, then he felt guilty that he was missing, some business, engagement he was supposed to be at. And he constantly felt guilty. And so he just basically gave into, I'm going to go to my kids' activity tonight. I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm going to put all that other stuff aside. And this is what I'm going to enjoy tonight. And, when the next crisis comes up, okay, I may have to miss a kid activity, but then I'm going to feel good about, something's important at my congregation. I need to be there. This is critical, and I'm going to focus on that. But by goodness, if I've already missed a kiddo activity this week, I'm not going to miss a second one. And that, just at the CFO role, as much as I'd like to say, I can always put my kids first, it doesn't always happen that way. But by God, I'm not going to miss something twice. And I think I really have worked really hard to take his words very personally, and have applied those to my life. And it's like, nope, I've already missed a kiddo activity this week. That's not going to happen. Baseball game's coming first. You guys are going to have to go without me. I'll get caught up next week. And it's empowering too to do that. This is not, I'm not going to, have my family suffer a second time in a week, or or, my nonprofit or community, or, what are all those things I'm involved with, I make sure it never happens twice.
That's a great tip. And from what I've seen over the years that I've been at Cox is everybody's issue is a fire. So it's like, okay, I think that's just the way business is. Everybody's issue is in a fire. So you really do need to figure out, personally, what is the most important thing for you to do that day, because everybody else has got their important thing, and you need to stick with, unless somebody asks, always ask me, did anybody die? And it's like, nope, nobody died today. It's a good day, we'll hit it again tomorrow. So that's great, Jennifer. I love that. Never miss something twice. That's very good. Something to keep in mind for all of us. So, any questions, Carrie? Nope. Okay.
Hey, Lisa. One
Yes.
last thing I would just say about tips and tricks. I wrote
Okay.
this down, and I thought it was important to say. But the more you can understand your partner's business, makes so you have a better feeling of when no is appropriate too, right? If it's
Oh, that's fabulous, Chris.
a key strategic thing for your partner, then maybe this is just one that you're gonna bite the bullet on. We're not gonna say no. We're gonna figure out a way to do it. The other thing is have the self-awareness about, there's sometimes you're just not gonna say no. I can tell you, if Mr. Esser reaches out to me, I'm probably gonna nail that directive.
Right.
If Colleen Jennison reaches out to me, I'm nailing that directive. So have some self-awareness of when no even can be appropriate. But most of it is in the minutia of our day to day, and that's where you've got to learn to execute on it, or you're really going to struggle.
Fabulous, Chris. Great reminder. Yep. Yeah, because there are people you do not say no to, regardless. So, all right. Let's move on to our final question. Jennifer, let's start with you on this one. And can you give us an example of when you've had to say no and what happened?
Sure. Nancy kind of hit on this when she was talking about stepping back, maybe from a committee that she was serving on. Similar, coming into a new organization and coming into the Kansas City market. Clearly in LinkedIn, there must be a search function that says CFO, new role, whatever I changed on my LinkedIn. The moment I got to UPN, my phone rang off the hook. Every vendor wanted to meet with me, every nonprofit, every community group. My phone rang off the hook, which at first you're very flattered, but then you realize, okay, what's going on here? How has everybody gotten my name, and everybody wants me. And so I'm starting my third year at UPN. And I think my first year I felt, going into it, I met with the community partners. I met with several boards. I met with vendors. Did all those things, and all those asks everybody had. Can we come in and present? And we want to win your business, or we serve on this board. Can you come be on this panel? And my response to everyone was, so flattered, honored that you would think of us, or you want to get in front of us. I'm really taking my time to be thoughtful. I really want to, I don't want to spread myself too thin. I've done that before. I'm really trying to be thoughtful about how I'm going to allocate my time. So this first year, I'm just a sponge. I'm soaking it in. And then, my next year, once I get a little bit farther, I'll figure out, what groups I'm going to join, how I'm going to allocate my time. And I would share with them, my number one fear is I'm going to tell everybody yes. And then that one thing that comes along, like, oh my gosh, I so wish I could do that. I'm going to be so disappointed that I'm going to have to tell that person no. So I didn't want to fill up my bucket and not have room to take something new that comes along that really excites me. And that was very easy for people to understand. Like, I don't want to overextend myself, and I'm going to be very thoughtful about how I'm going to allocate my time and where I'm going to spend it. It was amazing. It just kind of shut them down a little bit, right? They're like, how can you push back on that? And so it gave me that runway to really get get involved in the community, kind of learn the community better, learn all the nonprofits, and and way smarter for doing that, of not overextending myself like I think I had probably in my previous role when I was in Wichita. So that was my little tip. And so as you think about transitioning between roles and new jobs, or maybe your kid is leaving the middle school and they're moving to high school or elementary or whatever, and anytime you get those opportunities to kind of start new, use those as opportunities to reset and say, okay, I was the room mother. I did it all, did all those things or whatever. Well, maybe as your kids transition to middle school, it's time to reset those expectations and think about, okay, how can I approach this maybe a little bit differently and a little bit more strategically?
That's fabulous. Good advice. Chris, do you have an example of you can share with us of when you had to say no and what the outcome might have been?
Yeah, it was so easy to come up with this. So my team, for those of you that don't know me or know what my team does, but my team is responsible for fulfillment with Cox business customers. So Carrie and her team goes out and sells it. I always say that they kill it and we cook it. So Carrie goes out and kills it, and then my team is responsible for cooking it and serving it up, right? And so in the fulfillment space, um, we have a team of ICOMS experts. So I've got a group that does a lot of work in ICOMS, and they're very good in ICOMS, and which is a database that we use at Cox. But long story short, a lot of the resources that have either moved into other roles or maybe moved to Atlanta, or maybe we've even eliminated some of those resources over time, that worked in the ICOM space. We find that we're one of the groups out there that still knows how to do everything in ICOMS, and there's less of us than there used to be. So what'll end up happening is we'll get a lot of requests for $0 work orders or account cleanups or database scrubs or whatnot that they're expecting my team to get into. And my team's role is really about installing revenue that we're going to bill every month. In fact, we have an install LRP. So I find myself more and more these days sort of as this gatekeeper or protector of the team from these type of requests. So I've actually had I've had a whole slew of no's lately, and but again, making the asker feel valued, understanding what their priority is, and by the way, we've absorbed a few of them too because they were critical to the business. Some of them are more about this would be a nice thing to clean up because our teams are so slow right now during COVID or something, and I'll say, well, my team is not really slow right now, and we're on pace to hit our 6 months of LRP in a row. So we need to stay focused at the task at hand, which is installing new revenue. And so that's probably a more recent example of something. But I will add this at the end here, but because we were talking about the tips, which I think is probably the most valuable part to a lot of the folks on this call is, how do I take some of this information and go execute on it in my daily job or in my daily life? And one that the probably where you need to start practicing is with your leader. And it might be conversations with your leader about, hey, how do I tell you no? Or how do I communicate with you? How can you and I communicate when um, something is not as high a priority as your leader might think, and you are feet to the street and you understand, right? Because listen, that's the truth of it. The higher you rise, you're a little more disconnected from some of the actual work that takes place on the street. And how can you then turn that around and go and communicate with your leader? And I've got a really strong, tough boss myself, and so I have to be able to go and have those conversations with my leader, and that's probably a great place to start for many of you is having that honest conversation with your boss, like, how do I tell you no? I took this webinar. I think it's fantastic. I want to balance my time and my life, and I want to be more strategic and better at my work. How do I work with you to be able to say no from time to time? And I think that's a great place to start. So I just wanted to add that in for the tips and the traits. But no, I've had a slew of no's lately in the some work that's coming from other groups trying to get our team to execute on that we're not staffed for. And honestly, if I were to measure the strategic priority, it's just not there.
And have you had any pushback on that, or has everything gone smoothly?
It's gone fairly smoothly. I'd say maybe one pushback that we tried to accommodate at some level. So, that's another thing. It's okay to come off of no. If you get more information, if just because you say no doesn't mean you have to draw a line in the sand. If you say no and more information comes to light and it gives you a better education on the strategic value of the priority for the company or for that work group, who, by the way, you might be knocking on their door next for some help. So you got to be thinking through those things. How can I, incorporate some of their work into my team, because I know that in 20 minutes I'm going to call them and need a favor. And so those things are important to think through. But probably just one, and we were able to work through it, and we were able to take
Right.
some of it. But in regards to the last case, one of our back office phone groups was able to take what was a pretty big project, 2,500 phone numbers that needed a manual change, which is a lot, and they were able to absorb that for us. And but by saying no, and by saying, is there a better place for this work? And sometimes that's the question: is there a better place to put this work that you're asking that maybe aligns better with the priorities? And that's something that seems to have worked for me.
That's fabulous. Great
I think for
example,
the
Chris.
leaders on the phone call too, to piggyback off of what Chris was saying about the amount of time, managing up to your boss and negotiating and educating them. As leaders, we too need to ask those questions. I'll try. I'm not always good, but I'll try to say, when I'm asking for something like, "Hey, Amy, is that a 1 hour thing I'm asking for?" Like, I think what I'm asking for is a 10-minute thing. But if you tell me that's a half day thing, I don't want you spending a half day. I wouldn't want you spending more than 20 minutes on this. So only spend a little bit of time on this. The worst thing we can do as a leader, and I know I've done it multiple times, is ask for something and then find out someone spent 7 days on something. I'm like, that's not what I wanted at all either. So as leaders, and especially once you start, I find when I put the C word in my name, the chief, I find that what I ask for has so much more weight. I wish it worked around the house and with my kids, and so I have to be even more careful that if I'm interacting with someone more front line and I've asked for something, dang, I just needed one little number and I don't expect this huge analysis to go along with it. So managing up, but then as leaders, I think managing down and making sure we're careful about what we're asking for and that we don't create those fire drills. We do it and we don't even realize we're doing
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Agree
And
with that.
I think that's where it's so helpful to make sure you're clarifying the request and you're asking those questions ahead of time instead of just saying, absolutely, I'll take care of it, which is what I think a lot of us tend to do. All great information. So I do want to be mindful of time. We are at 4:14. Lisa, thank you for leading these questions. Truly appreciate it. Do we have any last minute questions? I feel like that was just a blast through, but all great information and great tips. So just double checking. I'm looking at the chat box, making sure we don't have anybody with their hand raised. I think we're good. Okay, well, I do want to thank everybody again so much for joining in and participating.